We will get into goal setting. Kat, thanks for your comment there. I know there's different ways to do goals, and this is not the only way. This is just one option. If you wanted to have that in your bucket to be able to use this. And it's more from a personal standpoint. You can use it for the different jobs that you have too, but it wouldn't be like an organization's take on goal setting. So before we jump into that, I do want to remind you there is a workbook for this that I have posted in the virtual campus. So it would be helpful to have the workbook. Not to say that you don't need it, because you can scratch it on a piece of paper what you're going to put. It's just the workbook has that nice and organized for you. So if you go into the virtual campus and you click on topics and then accountability, you'll be able to locate the workbook as a post from me with a PDF in it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. So what I'm actually going to do is, for this goal setting, I am going to walk you through I have it listed as a 5-step process. I would say that 6-step, and I'll cover that when we get to it, is more the evaluation. And you could do this model on a regular basis. So is actually a check-in. I would suggest every month to kind of look at your goals, and then continue to revamp it, revise it as you go forward. Like Kat mentioned, and I've mentioned, it's kind of a pilot, putting your things together and being able to tweak and be comfortable with that. So when we dive in, the first thing that you should do is identify the different roles that you play in your life. And the nice thing about the workbook that I put in here is for step 1, and I'll share this with you too, there's all these different types of roles listed on here. So it's basically in the workbook, you can circle the roles that apply to you. And there's lines in here you can add additional. If you don't have the workbook, just jot it down on a piece of paper. Think of, so I put in here about being a parent, being a daughter or a son, a sibling, a coworker, if you're a coach, if you're an entrepreneur, what are all those different roles that you play in your life? And think about that. So let me give you just a couple minutes and let you go through that list and circle or write those down. If you're done going through and circling or writing additional items in there, I'll ask you to put in the chat and let us know what some of your roles are. Give you another 20 seconds and then we'll move on. Okay, so with that, what I want you to do next is on your list of roles that you have, I want you to look at those and I want you to pick 3 of them. And these are the 3 that we're going to carry forward and focus on some goals for. So pick 3 of those roles that you want to focus on and just put a star next to those on your paper. And after you select those, I'll ask you to put at least one of those in the chat and let me know what that is. All right, so I know we have a mix of, we have entrepreneurs in the house, we have students, PhD students to be specific. I know a couple of those we have in here. We also have some parents in here, so that's good. Okay, so if you've identified your 3, let's go ahead and move on to step 2. So with step 2, oops, you're actually going to look, and this is where the workbook is really helpful. You're going to look and you're going to determine where you are now in that role versus where do you want to be. So vision, longer term, where do you want to be? So, and it's really nice within the workbook. And if you don't have this, you can jot this down on a piece of paper. It just has the 3 columns and then the rows for each. And this is your role. Where are you now? And then where do you want to be? So you can use just a couple bullets about where are you now and where do you want to be. So I'll give you a few minutes for this one because this is going to take a while. All right, so how are you guys doing on step 2? So just to recap, because it looks like we had 1 or 2 people join us, we went into the virtual campus, looked under topics and accountability and found the workbook there. Went through step 1 to identify the roles you played in your life by circling the items in the workbook or just writing those down as you thought of those. And then putting a star next to 3 of those roles that we can carry forward and talk about specific goals for. So then in step 2, we went to determine where you are now versus where you want to be for each of those roles. So there was a really nice, it's more of like a 3x3 within the workbook that you can use as to say, what's the role, where are you now, and where do you want to be? Okay, so Kat said you're doing good. Thank you for sharing the link to the workbook. I appreciate that. Is anyone daring enough to share one of their roles and what they put down about where you are versus where you want to be? If you can raise your hand, I can actually unmute you and allow you to share. Kat? Okay, let me ask you to unmute. Go.
So one of my roles is as an entrepreneur, and as far as where I am now, I just kind of put it big picture, not quite where I want to be. And then as far as where I want to be, I put down 3 different goals in terms of what will make me feel better of where I am.
Okay. Okay.
And I did want to ask you, am I still okay? I wanted to ask you with because I will tell you the other 2 were like on a more personal level. So like as a mom and as a partner. So when you say where we are now and where we want to be, what do you see us like? How do you see us describing that? Or, because I just kind of said, I'm not where I want to be, and then listed where I was, or does the next step help us more in that?
It helps you more in figuring out some of those gaps. We talk about where the gaps are. So I also picked entrepreneur as one of mine. And so where I am now, I said I'm starting out. I do feel like you're saying, not exactly where I want to be, but it's slow progression to get to where we want to be. Hoping people that I appreciate what I bring to the table. And then where I want to be is I want to be known as a person that's leading the charge and bringing lifelong learners together. And I want to make sure that I can speak at a variety of places. So there's it's like the visionary, like high level vision.
Okay. So like then that's kind of what I did with my
Okay.
3 higher level things. So that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kat. Anyone else like to share? You can raise your hand. And I was like you, Kat, too. Some of them were personal and then other were like on the professional front. So I appreciate you sharing that. All right. Oh, okay. So I did get a question. I'm on the Zoom on my phone. I'm not at home. You want to do the steps on your computer at home. The webinar will be shared, so you can do it later. I will actually share the entire link. I'll probably throw it on YouTube and share it from there. Or I think you can actually go back and listen to it on the Upskill University Facebook page. And then we'll also chunk it out and put it into the respective places within the virtual campus so people can access it there too. So if you do find this valuable, for those that are listening, that valuable to you or somebody else, we will have it available, the recordings for that. So great question. Thank you for that. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to step 3. So step 3, and Kat, this is where you were leading to, it's really understanding where are the gaps. Where are the gaps between where you are now and where do you want to be? So what's missing? What are those missing pieces? And sometimes you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So you don't know how to get to that vision. So maybe one of those gaps is you have to find out. You have to talk to somebody who is in that vision bucket and, you know, are where you want to be. And you have to talk to somebody to find out what are some of the things that you did. So in step 3, you'll actually turn in your workbook, and there's the 3 spots for each of the different roles, the 3 that you chose. And you'll write out, here's the name of the role, or here's the role, and then here's some of those gaps. So let me give you a couple minutes to think through this. And if you want to share, you'll be able to do that when we come back. All right, I'll go ahead and stop you there. So step 3 was we were understanding where the gaps exist between where we are today and where we want to be. And this one, some of you may have actually jumped ahead when you were starting to write, where are you today? Because I think we automatically jump to, I'm not where I want to be. And this is some of the things that is the reason. So one thing for me is an example is, so the role I put is as an employee for the full-time company that I work for. So where am I now? I feel like I'm in a really good role, but I automatically jump to, but I want experience in XYZ. And then where do I want to be is really eventually working on my own, managing for myself. But where that gap really is going back to where I said where I was now is I don't have XYZ experience. So I wanted to get some more before I bridge that gap and go to where I want to be. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'll open it up and see, does anybody have anything to share for the gaps that you identified? You can go ahead and raise your hand if you want to share, or even put it in the chat box. That's what you did too, Kat. Okay. Yeah. We're natural problem solvers, so we're always going to, where is the pinpoint of what do we need to do? Okay. All right, so I don't have any volunteers for that. So let's go ahead and go on to step 4. So in step 4, it's really developing goals specific to the gaps that you identified. So I mentioned that I don't have skills in X, Y, and Z. So when I went to start to write out my goals, some of the things I thought of is I would like to get experience in X. So one of the areas for me is human resources. I wanted to get more insight and experience, not just on the training and development side, which I have before, but in some of those other pieces related to HR. So when you're developing your goals, you're getting even more specific into how am I going to do that? And to do that, and I don't believe I have the slide in here for it. Nope. You would develop goals using the SMART approach. So for that, if somebody can type into the chat, for all panelists and attendees, if you can type in what SMART means. So the S in SMART is to be specific. So as far as being specific, you would really have to think of who's involved in this goal, what do I want to accomplish, where's the goal going to be achieved, and when do I want to achieve it, and why do I want to achieve this goal? So thinking about, I'll take myself back to when I decided that I was going to go and get my PhD. So when I thought about getting my PhD, hold on just a second. Okay. So when I thought about getting my PhD, if I have to be specific, is what program? What program am I going to get it in? So I had to identify. And so that was organization and management. And I got even more specific to say, I want that specialization in leadership. So you have to be really specific on what that goal is. The M is measurable. So you have to be able to measure it. And I can't remember who it was, but I remember hearing just recently, it was if you don't write it down to measure it and track it, then what's the use? You should be able to measure what your goal is and what you're trying to do. So how many or how much of something, it lets you know if you've reached your goal, and it also gives you an indicator of your progress towards your goal. So one of the nice things was when I onboarded to the most recent role that I am at work, they had a checklist, and I took it a step further, and the analytical mind input to it, I completed so many items out of this. So I'm actually 75% the way through with my onboarding plan. So it actually gives you something to look at, to focus on, and also to motivate you to get towards the end. So going back to the example of the PhD program, so I figured out what do I want to do my PhD in. So then the next thing was to be able to measure it. So it was looking at, here's all the milestones, here are all the pieces. So it was saying, I want to be able to complete these courses that I need to do these exams, and I need to be able to write my dissertation and complete this. We'll get to the time bound at the end, but the A relates to achievable. So achievable is, have other people done this before? Do I have the resources to actually do this? And if not, what am I missing? How am I going to go about getting those resources? So the A is achievable. Then the R is relevant. So is it relevant to what you want to do going forward? Is it realistic? Is it in reach? Given the time and resources you have, can you reach it? Are you able to commit to achieving the goal? So are there things can you move things out of your way so that you can achieve it and do what you need to do to reach that goal? So the R is relevant. And then lastly, the T is time bound. So by when? So I knew getting into the PhD program, I think they said 3, maybe 4 years, which is totally not realistic when you're working as a full-time adult. And I could probably get an amen from a couple people that are in the chat right now. So I had to look at it and see, by when do I want to complete this? So when I went in, I actually said it's 4 years, and here's how I'm going to track to that. It actually took a lot longer because as you're going through and tracking those milestones, one of them, I didn't get as far as I could, and there were some issues that we had to overcome within actually finding participants for my study. So I had to look at it, reevaluate that goal, and see, okay, do I stop and this is no longer a goal, or do I do what I can to finish the goal? And then you change your time frame for when you're going to change that goal. So you have to think about, is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it relevant? And is it time bound? And thank you, Heather, for putting those in the chat. So what you're going to do with step 4 is you're going to develop goals specific to each of the gaps that you identified. So for the sake of this exercise and time, I would just ask from here, maybe you pick one of the roles, carry that forward and say, okay, what are some of the goals specific to how I can fill these gaps related to this role of where I am versus where I want to be? Here's what's missing, here's the gap. Now, what are some of these goals that I can use that SMART approach to assign those to it so that I can move forward? So I'll give you just a couple minutes to take a look at that and start to write those out before we move on. How are we doing on this exercise so far? Give me a number in the chat box to let me know how many that you've gotten through. I think we were just going to take one forward. So let me know yes or no if you were able to identify at least one goal for that role. And I go back to thinking too what Kat said earlier when we talked with her about you have to be in the right mindset, the right mind space. So this definitely is an exercise that's going to take some thought. So if it's not working right now, we'll definitely have that recording so you can take a listen to it a little bit later as well. Okay, so I'm getting a couple yeses here. All right, so an example of a goal. So I developed an example and it was basically thinking about that employee as an employee and where I want to be. One of the things that I wanted to do, one of those gaps was to get some more insight into HR and some of the stuff done there. So what I did was I developed a goal to say within the next month, I will find 2 people in an HR role related to professional development and or system work, so the technical aspect of programs, and schedule time with them to learn about their roles. And I'll develop questions based on what I know so far or some things I might have a question about just in general about their role to learn a little bit more about their role and some of the things that they do. And that will help to give me some insight into that. And then I could dig deeper, maybe ask them, do they have recommendations of people that I could talk to also to help fill in that knowledge gap? So from here, does anybody want to share one of the goals that you identified? Feel free to share that in the chat. I know one thing you need to do also is make sure your chat goes to all panelists and attendees. I've gotten a couple from people that just go to all panelists. I think it defaults to that. So you can change that and put that in. All right, so with that, let me go ahead and move to step 5. So step 5 is prioritizing your goals according to what's realistic for each month and lay out your plan. So in the workbook, and again, for those of you that may have joined a little bit late, the workbook is in the virtual campus, it is under topics and then accountability, and you'll see a post from me with the PDF. So in the workbook, you'll see this page is for your plan, laying out your plan. And this only lays out for the next 6 months. What I like to do is, you have a long-term vision for things, but sometimes you don't know what's going to change between now and 6 months from now. So you may want to be working on this specific goal, but you take little pieces of that and minimize, put the different pieces, lay them out as you go. The other thing too is sometimes something might come and get in the way. So if it ends up tripping you up, so the example I gave about working on my PhD, and my thought was I would be done within 4 years, which is almost a year longer than the program actually said, but I was trying to be realistic with all that I had on my plate and with trying to work full time. It actually ended up taking a lot longer than that. So it ended up taking 6 years total. So I had to readjust. So if I would have had all of my goals, all of the pieces that I needed to do for my goals laid out, then I would have gotten frustrated and had to rearrange that. So you need to know what that long-term vision is, where you want to be, but you have to take baby steps towards getting there and being realistic with yourself and thinking about some of the pieces of SMART and setting up those goals of what can you tweak and be kind to yourself. Like Kat was saying earlier, the things that we tell ourselves and our thoughts, being nice to ourselves when you're not quite going to make, that one thing that you're trying to do for the month because something else gets in the way. So this is just an opportunity in the workbook for you to be able to come in here and put some items of what are maybe some tasks related to your goals that you need to complete. and prioritize those across those next 6 months as to what you should be doing. My recommendation from here, if I was to add a step 6, is the evaluation of your goals and how you're going to achieve those goals. I would recommend at least once a month that you visit your plan, what's laid out, what you have for the month. Did you achieve what you wanted to achieve for the month? And then being able to move on. So that you can basically we took 3 roles and we started to identify where are we, where do we want to be, where are the gaps, and then taking those gaps and figuring out, okay, what are some goals to help fill these gaps, and then putting them onto the calendar, prioritizing what are the pieces I need to do related to these. So I know several people that are listening and may listen to the replay as well had heard quite a few weeks back I had done a upskill live in the morning on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook about being able to track your to-dos. And that's a popular time management, task management, all of that is really popular. So it's really figuring out, okay, here's these bigger goals, these bigger visions, and you're funneling it down. And then what are the tasks, the multiple tasks I need to do to accomplish these goals? So think of, for April, I want to do this. So I had mentioned, in this month, I want to talk to 2 people. I want to talk to people who have this criteria, and I want to be able to have my questions ready to talk to them to get, Y out of it, or X, Y, or Z out of it. And then as I move forward into May, if I'm looking at the calendar overall, maybe I would take, okay, in May, they had recommend one other person. So I'm going to go to that person in May. So there may be things that you start to identify as you're going through it versus other things that you might already see the vision for and have it laid out to how you're going to get to that end goal. So I hope that this was helpful. Let me see. Okay, so one of the people chatting in said is to update their presentations. So if you think about it, think about that funnel too. We're starting out big. Here's the vision where we want to be. Let's start to figure out what are the gaps from where we are to where we want to be. And then how do we develop goals to bridge those gaps and to check those gaps off. And then you have tasks related to your goals so you can start to even using those tasks as your progress indicator. So like I mentioned, having the classes that I need to take, and I can check those off and it shows me where I am to get to the long goal.